All right, Byron, let's dig into your swing here and see if we can give you some clarity around some cause and effect of why. I know you said in your email that you predominantly miss to the right, but then occasionally you can hit kind of a pull. And the thing that you're curious about is the early release of your wrist angles that you see when you film yourself from the face-on view. So if we take a look at that, and I'll just start right there with that. So it's this early release of the wrist angles that you see here that's concerning to you. And and again, when I say obviously release of the wrist angles, I'm talking about the fact that there's the shaft should probably be somewhere in this ballpark right here, but in your case you are uncocking your wrist and releasing those wrist angles early. Now that's problematic. For one thing, one reason that's problematic is because you have the potential to hit the ground now well behind the golf ball. And I think you mentioned in your email that that is also one of your missed tendencies. And an understanding of that is just simply the fact that the club's moving in a big circle, and as you start to uncock those wrists sooner, that low point of that swing arc, which should be somewhere here in front of the golf ball, is going to potentially be moving back here behind the ball somewhere as you are uncocking those wrists. So the first thing I want you to understand is that the mechanism or what you see as an early uncocking of your wrist is actually a mechanism that allows your swing to be somewhat functional. And what I mean by that is, when we look at this early release over here on the right, this lining the shaft up with your left arm, that is a mechanism for squaring the club face. So when golfers are doing that, it is in an attempt to get that face pointing towards the target, or even slightly to the left of the target, depending on the direction of that they're swinging in. So when you see golfers lining that shaft up early, it's because they're trying to square the club face. Okay, that's the only reason that golfers do that. It's not for power, because it's not a powerful move. It's actually slowing the club down dramatically. It is only in an effort to orientate that face somewhere toward the target. So the question begs is, why do you do that? Why do you need to do that? So to get that answer, to go back to root cause here, we got to look at the down the line view here. So the first thing I want to explain to you is the rate that you cock your wrist in the golf swing and hinge your wrist in the backswing is going to determine how your wrists move. Okay, and in your case, you set your wrist quite abruptly in the backswing, and you have a lot of angle between the left arm and the shaft here. Okay, and so the faster that those wrists load, the more your left wrist is going to go into what we call extension. And extension would be sort of a cupping of your left wrist. And you do that in your golf swing later past this point right here. So from here to here, you're pretty much flexing your wrist or bowing your wrist and kind of closing the club face. But it's later on in this phase right here where the wrists start to move toward extension. And I want you to notice how, if we look very, very closely, you will start to see some separation between the palm of your right hand and the top of your left hand. And that separation right there, you can see it getting wider. It's because your left wrist is starting to cup or starting to extend. And here at the top, we can see, like, here's the angle to the forearm bone, and then we've got an angle going up to the back of the wrist. So if you see that, that little angle right there, that is the wrist going into extension. And so you start doing that halfway through the course of your backswing, so in about this phase here, And then that exacerbates when you transition the club. You actually get deeper into extension, and the way that I'll show you that is, the way I'll further elaborate on that is, the problem with extending your wrist is it has an effect on the pitch of the shaft, how steep the shaft is in transition, and it also has an effect on the club face. And so let's look at your club face in the backswing. And what I want you to pay attention to is how much of the club face is visible to the camera from this down the line view. So quite a lot. So I would say you've got a very strong grip. You've got the left wrist in a little bit of flexion, so kind of a bowed position here. And you're presenting a lot of club face to the camera. Now, as you transition, I want you to note the difference in the club face when you start down. So we've got less club face being visible, and in this phase where the wrist is really extending, we have less and less club face being available. So it's in this early transition where the wrist is extending and the face is kind of twisting open. Now you will respond to that, because if you just kept turning your body and rotating and curving your hands to the left with a fairly open club face, you'd have too much left to right movement or even slicing your golf ball. So one of the things that you've learned to do is uncock your wrist in transition early in an effort to rectify that open or slightly open club face. And that brings, and again, we've already talked about what uncocking your wrist does, but the reason why you're doing it is because of the extension in your wrist. So if I throw up an example of something more that we'd be looking for from a down the line perspective, maybe something like this here. If we watch Adam Scott kind of nearing the top, so I'm going to look at yours and compare it sort of nearing the top of the backswing. And if we look at Adam Scott here on the right, we'll see quite a bit of difference in what the wrists are doing. So first of all, in this phase of the swing, look at how you can see the logo on the back of his glove and how his left wrist is in more of a solid or arched condition. And then it's in this downswing phase where his wrist is going to do exactly the opposite of what yours is doing. So yours is going to steepen a little bit. You're going to go into a little bit more extension. We can't see any of the back of your left hand at this point. And if you watch Adam Scott on the right, we're going to see as the shaft is pitching, we can see quite a bit of the back of his left hand. He's showing us the glove. He's showing us the back of that glove. And he's doing that by putting a little torque on that handle. He's twisting that grip by flexing or bowing or arching his wrist. And that's what you need to be doing over here. Instead, you're kind of cupping the wrist. Again, this late in the downswing, we can't see any of your glove. If we keep looking at Adam Scott over here, we're going to see a lot of his glove. So those wrist alignments are in completely different positions, and therefore the club face alignments are in completely different positions. And so he doesn't need to early release uncock. He can keep turning his body, whereas you stop your body. You have to stop your body from rotating because you're going to be straightening your right arm and uncocking your wrist in an effort to square the club face. Where in his case, because the wrist is bowed and arched, and you can really get a good look at that down here late in the downswing, you can see how arched his left wrist is. He can just keep pulling the handle left around the corner through impact and opening up his body to square the face. And so in your case, you've had to turn the rotation of your body off, and the club just kind of flips past you. And that's where the timing element is associated with your swing. So what we've got to do is, you've got nice arch to the wrist here, the face is under control. We've just got to keep carrying that arched wrist toward the top here. And I want you to do that by feeling like you keep your right arm a little wider. What do I mean by that? Keep the distance from the butt of the club to your right shoulder just a little wider. You have a tendency to kind of overflex your right elbow in this phase of the backswing. And because of that, you start cupping your wrist and get it really, really extended. So I want you to feel a wider right arm in the backswing. I want you to feel like you're pushing the butt of the club further from your right shoulder. And I want you to feel a little twist of that grip, a little more bowed and arched feeling. And what that's going to do, it's going to actually kind of position the shaft a little bit more over here. And that's simply just going to be because you've changed the wrist alignment. You've gone from the extended, your club's across the line because you're cupping your wrist. If you just flattened your left wrist out, it would point more over here. That's going to shallow the club a little bit better. It's going to be a little bit more behind you on the way down, which is fine. You know, we would want that shaft to be in this ballpark, probably right here at about this moment. And we would really want to be able to see, if you're bowing that wrist and twisting that grip a little bit more of the back of that left hand, like you see from Adam Scott over here on the left. Excuse me, on the right. So hope this video helps you, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.